Welcome into the February 10th edition of the Locked On Leafs podcast. I'm Mike DiStefano with Dave Morassutti. It's game day, Leafs Nation. Toronto back after a 9-day hiatus. We'll tee up this weekend's back-to-back against Columbus, and Kyle Dubas spoke ahead of practice today. He gave us a bit more clarity on what his approach is going to be at the NHL trade deadline. We'll talk about that. And I also got some injury updates as well to Matt Murray, to Matthews, and a little bit on Jake Muzzin. So we'll get into all that and more coming up on today's edition of the Locked On Leafs podcast.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Locked On Leafs podcast, your one-stop shop for all things Leafs. I'm your host, Mike DiStefano from TSN 1050 Toronto Radio, also known as Al's brother on TSN's Overdrive and TSN 1050's Leafs Lunch. Joining me, it's my co-host, Dave Morassutti from Sportsnet, also a writer for the NHLPA. Locked On Leafs is a daily Maple Leaf-centric podcast, so be sure to subscribe for free wherever you get your podcasts from. You can also check us out on YouTube as well. We got new content coming out each and every day, Monday through Friday. So if it's your first time checking us out, hopefully you enjoy it and you sub and you come back every Monday through Friday. It's all Leafs all the time here on the Locked On Leafs podcast. And today's podcast is brought to you by FanDuel, the official sports book of the Locked On Network. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. We finally got a game, Dave. Like, we've gone 9 days without having to break down or tee up any Maple Leafs hockey. We've made it through the All-Star break and then through the bye week, and finally tonight they take on the Columbus Blue Jackets. You excited to finally get to watch the boys in blue back on ice?
Yeah, it's gonna be a welcome to not have to figure out what the heck I'm gonna watch sometimes at night. Now there's been some decent hockey games, although Colorado very disappointed in you in your performance against the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Now, you say this, it sounds like somebody may have made a wager on the game on FanDuel. Is this...
No, I was close to doing it. Then I saw that Cale Makar was going to be out, and I'm like, yeah, just going to not do that.
Yeah, that's tough. Cale Makar out for a couple weeks or till the end of the road trip, at least for the Colorado Avalanche. That's tough after taking that hit to the head from Jeff Carter the other day. Speaking of injuries, Kyle Dubas, we'll get into the game in a moment here. But I want to talk about some of the stuff that Dubas talked about today, and then some of the more newsier items around Leafs camp. I mean, we expected to see some stuff kind of come out. It was the first day back since last Wednesday, I guess. So there was going to be a lot of new information that we were going to acquire. So we could break it all down. Kyle Dubas did speak today ahead of the first practice. What did you find most notable from what he had to say today?
Man, it felt like a lot of the same stuff we've kind of been hearing from him the whole time. I would say that, him reiterating, his thoughts on the defense, right? And kind of, it was a thought in their head to maybe look at potentially upgrading the blue line, but then seeing how they played with certain guys out of the lineup, it's kind of making them, I think otherwise. But he's not gonna, he will look to make an upgrade if one is there and it makes sense. And we now know what everybody has been saying, which is first round pick and Matthew Nice, her rental ain't gonna happen.
No. So I guess unless Columbus comes really down on their price for Gavrikov, you could probably strike the Leafs off the list if that's true, and they're unwilling to give up those top end assets for a pending UFA. Also means probably Ryan O'Reilly could be a guy that you strike off the list as well if they're not willing to give up those assets. Is Timo Meier a player? Because he also basically talked about how everyone talks about these big names, but they're more worried about making their team better, more balanced. And, that's kind of the thought process that I've been having the last little bit, right? More around the peripheral, get a couple of pieces to help build up the depth and both on the back end and in the bottom six. Potentially, you could find a second liner. I think that'd be great, but I don't think it's 100% necessary. I kind of got the vibe that maybe that's where he is going to be going in the next couple weeks here when he's having his conversations about what this team is going to do leading into the deadline. I don't know if you picked up on that or what else he kind of thought about what he had to say about the deadline.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the questions also was like, how does your future kind of play into this, right? The fact that you still need a contract. But I think the fact that he didn't rule out the possibility of, saying we are looking to bring in people that will help us improve overall and not just the big names per se. I thought that was a very interesting way to say we might be looking at someone that nobody else is talking about. Because, I mean, when did people talk about Mark Giordano to the Leafs? It wasn't really like a big. Nobody thought Mark Giordano would be the number one target for the Leafs last year.
Yeah, there was like a little bit of chatter about it, but it wasn't like extreme chatter to the point that we're seeing with some guys this season. But yeah, like Ilya Lyubushkin was a guy who came out of nowhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
Making that signing. Colin Blackwell came out of nowhere, making sure that they picked him up. Like they've done this where they've picked up peripheral pieces in the past. So I'm curious to see where they're going to go, but it does sound like it. You're right. Like coming out and just being like, yeah, first of all, doesn't plan on trading out big assets for rentals, and then said we're not really focusing on adding star players, just guys who are going to make the team overall better. And so that probably, Patrick Kane gone, O'Reilly gone, Gavrikov gone, like those guys probably out of the mix when it comes to stuff that the Maple Leafs are going to do. So we'll see what that means, who they will go after. It's not to say that they're unwilling to deal away first-round picks or Matthew Nyes. If they're going to do it, though, they would have to make sure that the guy has term and will be with this club and factor into its future. So it's not that they're completely off the table, is what I gathered, but it's gonna have to be for somebody with term. So we're talking, the Jacob Chykrins or like I remember mentioning Pavel Buchnevich a few weeks ago. Now that Tarasenko's been traded, maybe his name starts to creep up. Are they willing to move on from him? Like I think Toronto would be willing to give up some futures to bring in a Buchnevich. Connor Murphy's a name that I've brought up. Jake McCabe is somebody who's been, talked about a lot. He's got a couple years on his deal. So I would be shocked if this team did, really attack the rental market. I think we'll see them go after guys with a little bit of term or, more depth pieces like a Bonino or someone like that who's a UFA, but not going to cost you a whole lot. Maybe a second, a third round draft pick or B-level prospect.
Yeah. And, we heard Dubas talk about today about the bottom six, right? And, how they kind of stacked up and that I think he's really hoping that one of these younger guys, catches along, right? Pontus Holberg's back up. We know he can play in the bottom six, but can a guy like Alex Steves, Joey Anderson kind of give you something there that maybe you don't have to go out and look for out, at the trade deadline? I think that's why when you saw those two were being, when you saw that, especially Alex Steves, that was a bit of a surprise call up
over Bobby McMahon.
Exactly. Like it just shows, I think, you have to audition these guys because if they can't bring it, you got to go get it, right? When you look at what this bottom six needs to do, they got to start winning those puck battles. They got to start making life tougher on those upper echelon opponents. So I think Dubas is hoping, like, I know he probably wants those answers sooner rather than later because they don't want to be going into the trade deadline having to fill those needs. They like to do it, as we've noted. He likes to do it well before. And yeah, he just doesn't he doesn't seem to be. It's weird because he didn't especially say what he's looking for. And I mean, I guess that's a good thing because, then teams are going to try to, make him really pony up for it.
Right.
But yeah, it's hard for me to really decipher exactly where he wants to go.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's left ambiguous for a reason. Like he doesn't want, to your point, to tell everybody, "Hey, this is what I'm looking for, and I'm willing to give this up." This is part of the game. It's part of being a general manager. That's how you keep your leverage around this time of year, especially. Um, he also had some injury updates. Why don't we take a quick break? We can detail those updates on Matt Murray, Auston Matthews, also on Jake Muzzin. There was a couple call-ups you mentioned that will get an opportunity, and there was a signing today as well. The Maple Leafs re-upping one of their young players, 2 more years. I'll tell you who that is on the other side. But before I do, let me tell you about one of today's show sponsors, and that's our good friends at FanDuel. We're really excited about our new sports betting partner for Locked On because of the number one sports book in North America. It's FanDuel, and if you're new to FanDuel, it's even better. They got so many great features that make betting on sports fun and easy. You can download FanDuel now so you can bet Super Bowl 57 with a no sweat first bet. You'll get up to $3,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. FanDuel lets you bet on everything from money line to point spreads to who's going to score a touchdown. If you don't want to bet football, they got plenty of hockey for you to bet on as well, including tonight's game between the Maple Leafs and the Blue Jackets. The FanDuel Sportsbook app is safe, secure, and super easy to use. Best of all, you can get paid your winnings instantly. So join FanDuel today at FanDuel.com/lockedon to claim your no sweat first bet on Super Bowl 57. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL and the Locked On Network. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. It's Mike DiStefano and Dave Morassutti. We got a game tonight, Maple Leafs and Columbus, night 1 of the back-to-back in Columbus. Tomorrow they will be in Toronto. A couple of guys who won't be taking part in this weekend's game. Auston Matthews, we already knew that. The 3-week timeline, certainly he wasn't going to be ready to go coming right out of the All-Star break. But I think there was a good positive sign today to see Auston Matthews out on the ice in a red non-contact jersey. So that's, he still was in a red jersey. But the fact that he was actually on the ice 8 days ahead of that 3-week timeline, I think is a good sign.
Oh, it's definitely a good sign. And I watched the video of him at practice. He's not doing any light skating. He's pushing it, right? He's doing drills. He's testing out that knee. So I think, and a lot of the media members were commenting saying, this doesn't look like he's that far off, just based on what we've been seeing. So whatever he was doing during the All-Star break looked like it did him some good.
Yeah, and got some rest, got some work on it, rehab perhaps. Either way, it sounds as though that 3-week timeline, the minimum 3-week timeline, looks like they may actually be sticking to it because he looks pretty good so far. You talked about seeing video of guys at practice. Did you see the video of Matt Murray at practice today, Dave?
That one was, considering the guy was placed on IR, I thought it was quite curious that he was at practice as well.
Well, that's the thing, Dave. That is the question we have here. So one of the bigger, I guess, news items of the day, I would say, we were kind of bearing the lead on this one to, only start talking about it almost 15 minutes into the show. Matt Murray was placed on injured reserve today. He got that ankle checked out, I guess, when he returned to the practice facility today, and decided still going to take a couple of weeks. Kyle Dubas said still probably a couple of weeks until we see Matt Murray. Joseph Woll was recalled coming off of his stellar AHL All-Star game. So he's going to get one of these games against Columbus. But, Matt Murray, for him to be back on IR, but also be practicing and looked as though he was practicing pretty good. That ankle looked kind of fine if you watch the videos.
Mm-hmm.
Very curious situation. And I don't want to blame Kyle, or I don't want to accuse Kyle Dubas of, circumvention or anything like that. But I'm pretty sure I literally heard him today say the reason why we have Matt Murray on IR is for a roster thing, so we could call up some guy. Hold on, I actually have the video because I thought that it was legitimately he tattled on himself.
Well, I think Matt got back out skating today. He'll go on IR just because we just need the roster space, and he's past the 7-day window. But I think the thing
we just need the roster space. So, like, we're just gonna toss him on IR.
Well,
He's not really that hurt.
Technically, they can do it because he's been out for that long. So they're not breaking any rules. But yeah, I mean, it's quite clear and obvious why they put Matt Murray on IR. What it also suggests to me, though, is that this doesn't seem like the LTIR type of injury that we were kind of bringing up. Not yet. I mean, look, there's always a chance, and we know with Matt Murray, there's a pretty good chance that he could have a setback.
And if that's the case, Dave, do you think the Leafs are set in goal? Like, we're talking about the All-Star, we're talking about the trade deadline, and a lot of focus was on the forward group and the defensive group, and even Dubas said today, like, that's where he's going to be focusing. But I mean, with this Matt Murray character, like, can you really trust him that when he's back in 2 weeks, couple of weeks, that he's not just going to bow out again? Like, what happens in the playoffs when he's supposed to start a game and all of a sudden something flares up? Like, do they need to have another guy in place that they feel comfortable with, another veteran of some sort? Because, I mean, Joseph Woll, as good as the season he's having in the American League, I mean, do you feel comfortable with the Samsonov and Woll tandem down the stretch?
Well, we don't know until we see how Joseph Woll plays. Like this is the perfect opportunity right now. 2 weeks. 2 weeks is definitely not enough, but it's something. Like, we don't want to be throwing Joseph Woll in without having any semblance of an idea of what he can do in an NHL game. But I think at this point right now, Ilya Samsonov is the guy.
Yes.
Right? So I don't think there's going to be a situation where you're debating who will be starting on either on those games. Now, I understand something can happen to Samsonov because we've seen it happen already. I just think right now the Leafs did this back in the bubble when they got David Riddick and they gave up a 3rd-round pick to get him. To me, that felt like a waste of a 3rd-round pick. I don't think the Leafs, unless
would it have been a waste though if Anderson got injured? Like, Anderson, so they made that pick because that was Freddie's final year, and he didn't even come back to the team until like the last day of the season.
Right.
So they didn't even know if he was going to be back, what his situation was. But if he didn't play, right, and he was out for the year, he would have been the backup. And then you're one injury away from David Riddick having to be the starter. And if you didn't make that trade, it was probably like, Michael Hutchinson or someone even lower than that.
I believe so. Yeah, I think that's who it would have been. The thing is, yeah, I just want to see what can Joseph Woll do before I even, like, if Joseph Woll totally bombs out, then I think you can have that conversation. I think you can. The thing is, who are they going to get? Because you're going to get someone that you can have some faith that can step into a playoff series in an emergency. There aren't many of those guys out there that teams are just giving up.
Yeah, I mean, the two names that come to mind, we've talked about Karel and Melka before, but that's more of a 1A starter quality goaltender. That's a bit more of a bigger cast there.
Yeah.
And then we've also, I think, discussed James Reimer and Cam Talbot are probably the only other like goaltenders who are on the market who could be had and are available. You bring one of those guys in, maybe. Reimer's been here before. I don't think there's a lot of people that wouldn't mind bringing him back. Dangle would probably appreciate bringing back his boy James Reimer. I don't know. Like, at the end of the day, I think this is somewhat like to your point. This is definitely like a blessing in disguise, where it does give the Leafs a chance to see what Joseph Woll has at the NHL level. Played 4 games last year, and he was 3-1 with a shutout, 911 save percentage. Pretty good stuff, but it was only a 4-game sample size. He's probably only going to get like a game or 2 here. He's not going to get a whole lot in these 2 weeks that Matt Murray's gone. So I don't even know if he's going to get a bigger sample size, but at least they'll get a look at Joseph Woll. My issue is, like, I don't know what you can really glean if you're not giving him games, because from everything that I've read and heard, and through people that I've talked to who know Joseph Woll and know what he's all about, he's a very sound technical goaltender. So he could look flashy and really good in practice. But sometimes, that's all good and dandy. But then when it comes to a game and the pressure gets, a little higher, sometimes some goaltenders' game starts to fall off and they get a little less technical. So, like, I still think the guy's going to need to get some games. So with Murray out, it at least gives him that opportunity and the Leafs that opportunity to get a look at him. But I still don't know how comfortable I would be because, there's 30 games left. I don't want Samsonov starting 26, 25 of those 30 games. Like, I would like it to be more closer to a split. Maybe it's a 20-10 split, perhaps. But if that's the case, like, can Joseph Woll win that many games? Do you feel confident with him starting that many games? I don't know. For me, it's just like I just have little faith that Matt Murray can stay healthy. And in my mind, the tandem is pretty much now Samsonov and Joe Woll, and that's where I'm trying to grapple with.
Yeah, it's not a settling feeling. I'll just say that it doesn't make you feel confident. I get it. I just there's some time here. Like, I know the trade deadline's just under a month away.
Dude, it's 3 weeks. 3 weeks today.
3 weeks today. So you got 3 weeks to make the decision. I just the idea of giving up an asset for a goaltender right now when there's so many other yes, if goaltending is the reason why the the Leafs get out of the playoffs, like, it's going to be one of those situations where you kind of had to go with the cards that were played in front of you, right? You can try your best to predict the future as you can, but right now you have to kind of deal with the current present situation and what exactly you need.
Well, we'll see what the Leafs end up doing. We'll see if Matt Murray can get healthy. I mean, best case scenario, he is healthy because when he is playing, he's been better more nights than he's been poor. But availability is the best ability, and he just hasn't been that lately. And there's not much trust that the durability is going to hold up this season. But we'll see. Maybe I'm wrong. Honestly, I hope I do. I hope I am. I hope he comes back after this 2-week layoff that he's got here, in addition to the 2-week layoff that he had prior to the All-Star game since getting pulled in that game against Florida. Hopefully I'm wrong and he comes back and he's a terrific goaltender, much like he was for about a month stretch there when he came back from that original adductor injury. So perhaps he can come back and get it back on the rails. But as we witnessed a couple of weeks ago, eventually something flares up. Hopefully it doesn't happen at come playoff time. That's all I'm saying. And if it does, wouldn't mind having a little bit of extra insurance behind it. But again, we'll see what happens there. All right, we'll take one more quick break. When we get back, couple of players called up. They will get the starts. Actually, I'm curious. Okay, we'll have this conversation on the other side. Who you think? Because if Joseph Woll is going to start one of these 2 games, which one do you think he should start? We'll have that conversation on the other side to talk about Alex Steeves, who's also called up. He'll get his first game of the season. And then the Maple Leafs made a signing, bringing back another player, a young player, for 2 more seasons. We'll tell you who that is also next. I'm Mike DiStefano with Dave Morassutti. You're listening to Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. It's Mike DiStefano and Dave Morassutti. Maple Leafs back in action tonight after a 9-day layoff. Last time we saw this team, they were taking an L by the Boston Bruins, but a much different opponent tonight. Literally going from the top team in the league to the bottom team in the league coming out of the All-Star break. And it's not 1, but 2 games this weekend with a Friday, Saturday, home and home back-to-back in Columbus tonight, and then back in Toronto tomorrow. And I'm curious, Dave, because I was having this conversation with a friend of mine earlier today, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on it. So Joseph Woll is going to get one of these starts this weekend. We know that. But which one do you think would put him in the best scenario? The first game on the road with a less tired team, or on night 2 of a back-to-back, but on home ice, where maybe might be a little bit more comfortable, where you could, dictate the matchups. Where do you think would be kind of a better situation for our guy here, Joe Woll?
I'm thinking the home game. I'm thinking you just get him in a comfortable environment. But maybe the Leafs decide, you know what? If we really want to test out Joe Woll, let's throw him out in that first game after the break, where guys might be a little bit rusty. Yeah, they'll be refreshed, but they're probably going to be rusty.
Yeah.
So I still think they're probably going to give him the second night, just because some teams just stick to what most teams do, which is the backup always gets the second half of the back-to-back. It's tough to really figure this out in the Leafs case, because they've been going with a 1A, 1B situation. So we can't say that they've been going with the starter one night and the backup the second night. That's where now you're going to truly get, I think you're going to see now a more traditional setup of Samsonov will get that first one, and then Joseph Woll will get the second one, and then you don't play again until Wednesday. So
in Chicago.
Right? It's real barn burners here. So yeah, I think maybe you try that out, because it's a back-to-back, right? It's not like you're going to be burning any of them out early, and at least you have some days of rest here and some easier opponents coming up. On paper, easier opponents, I will say, because it's never easy when it's the Leafs. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with that.
It was a trick question, Dave.
Okay. You're going Samsonov night 1, aren't you?
No, honestly, don't think it matters. It's the Columbus freaking Blue Jackets, man.
We're strategizing to beat the Columbus Blue Jackets.
Like, you should, both of these goaltenders.
I've heard too many times, okay?
Both of these goaltenders should be able to go in with the team in front of them and get the victory. Night 1 and night 2. Because they're both playing on, they both are doing the back-to-back, right? It's not like you're going into a fresh team that's waiting for you or anything like that. True. They both got to go from Columbus, fly into Toronto, go through customs, and then play that second night. So they're both going to be in the exact same situation. So I don't think it really matters what game Joe Woll gets. I can make the argument for either or, but ultimately, I don't think you got to big brain it, because, and I know I asked you this, and I was kind of being a little cheeky, but I don't think it needs to be big brained because of who the opponent is.
That's fair. I just be able to get to it. Yeah, I know the coaching staff has thought long and hard about this. They have.
Yeah. So obviously no Auston Matthews, no Matt Murray. So Joe Woll will get one of these starts in the next 2 games here, either tonight or tomorrow. Pontus Holmberg was called up. Well, he's kind of been shuffling up and down, I suppose, but he was called back up today. He's on the 4th line, and Alex Steeves gets called up to the NHL. Steeves is a guy who hadn't really been given an opportunity this season, but he's somebody who's having a great year. Last year, low cup of coffee. They get 3 games, I want to say, with the Leafs, and then went down. We haven't seen him again until now. But in 44 games, he's got 38 points in the Marlies, so he's doing pretty good down there. And Coach Greg Moore, the Marlies head coach, said his last 5 games or so has been his best 5 on the season. So he's coming in riding high and earned himself this promotion. A little look-see to see if he can maybe hang in a top 4 role. And I mean, if they can fill some of these positions, like to your point earlier that you were talking about, they can fill some of these positions internally, not have to give up assets for a 4th line player. I mean, now's the time to figure it out. You got 3 more weeks to see if Anderson or Steeves or McMahon, see if those guys can take on some of these responsibilities and fill those roles internally, as opposed to having to go out and get guys and give up assets, picks, or prospects for it.
Yeah, I mean, and the Columbus Blue Jackets are the easy team to kind of throw these guys to, right? Because
Exactly.
yeah, Columbus is not very good, but they're not going to make it any easy on the Leafs because we know how bad teams play the Leafs. They play them like it's the Stanley Cup. So this is a good opportunity for these guys, right? I just think you look at you've seen what you need to see with a lot of guys on the roster. We just have no idea what to make of these types of players that look an injury or two happen. These are the first guys that get the call up. So
Yep.
this is the time to give them that shot.
Yep, absolutely. The blue line will look pretty status quo. Morgan Riley with TJ Brody, Mark Giordano, Justin Hall, and then Sandin and Timmy Liljegren paired up as the Swedish duo. You'll note that a name was not mentioned there, but there is news about this other player, and that is Connor Timmins. Not expected to play tonight in the game. Maybe he gets into one of these back-to-backs. Perhaps it's still kind of curious to see how they're going to do a little rotation if they do one, how this kind of works out. But anyways, but Liljegren or Timmins seems to be part of the team's future. Why do I say that? Well, today the Maple Leafs extended Connor Timmins 2 more years at $1.1 million per season. You're not a team that's as cap strapped as the Maple Leafs. You're not extending a seventh defenseman at 1.1 million if he didn't fit into your future plans.
Oh, 1,000%. We kind of heard that they were discussing it. I think it was CJ that brought up that they were making, working towards an extension, and it makes sense, right? This is someone that even though kind of plateaued a little bit, he showed that he can play in NHL games. What his role is going forward, it's tough to say, but you now have a little bit more assurance of knowing that you have Morgan Riley, TJ Bro, like you have a bunch of guys signed for next year. Like the Leafs are in a decent spot when you think about the off-season needs of what they have to do. Like the blue line is pretty much done.
Yeah, it is. The one guy, and kind of this is where my mind went to right away. The one guy who is not signed under contract, who I would consider to be one of the top 7 defensemen, I suppose, that the Maple Leafs are working with here, is Justin Hall, who is a pending UFA. Does this maybe signal to me? Actually, this signals one of two things. Okay, either Timmins is going to be that guy to replace Justin Hall, or you push Liljegren up and Timmins becomes the third pair defenseman. But essentially, he takes Hall's spot in the lineup as that third right-hand shot. Well, Brody, I guess, but you know what I mean. So it could mean that the Leafs plan on moving on from Justin Hall at the end of the season. But it could also maybe mean that the Maple Leafs could be trading one of Sandin and Liljegren perhaps as a part of a package to get a better forward, maybe. Like that was something else that kind of poked through my mind a little bit. Like if you're trying to trade, let's use Pavel Buchnevich as a random example since I've mentioned him before. But if you're looking to get Pavel Buchnevich, I mean, you're going to have to give up one of these talented young defensemen. And what if you're giving up, Timothy Liljegren? Well, now you have somebody who can step into his place in Connor Timmins and who can play that role. And you know that he can play that role effectively as a third pair guy. And now you've added a bona fide top 6 player. And you still feel pretty good about your third pair with Sandin and Timmins alongside each other, both short term and long term, as they're both also signed into next season. So those are kind of two things I thought about when I saw this deal and what it means for the Maple Leafs blue line going forward.
Yeah, I mean, it just gives you that flexibility and knowing that, okay, we know we have Giordano signed. We know we have Timmins signed. Justin Hall, I mean, unless he's gonna, I don't even know what his. It's the one thing is I don't think anyone has ever asked him kind of where he sees himself. But I mean, he's not going to get many opportunities to go and test free agency to see what he can get out there, right? So,
as in, like, he won't be a UFA. You don't think there's going to be suitors wanting him?
Well, I mean, how many teams are going to be pounding on Justin Hall's door?
I think there'll be a considerable amount.
Yeah, right. So, but it might if he doesn't do it now, like let's say he resigns with the Leafs, like that's how many more?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. So you're just talking about, okay. Yeah. We're on the same page.
Yeah,
I think there will be teams
There
that
will
look
be
at Justin
interest.
Hall. There's going to be interest, and they'll sign him to probably some stupid contract. I mean, Goodbranson got 4 years, $4 million this year in Columbus. Like, we're going to see Goodbranson tonight, and you're going to see what a $4 million defenseman looks like, or a $4 million mistake, rather. But it's a mistake that gets made all the time. And you know that big right shot defenseman, and Hall's not considered, like a big hulking presence, but, a defensive right shot defenseman typically go for in the range of 3 to 4 million. I mean, Labushkin got just, a hair under 3 million this past offseason. I think Justin Hall could probably get something similar.
Yeah. No,
I don't think he's going to be in Toronto.
No, it is not going to be in Toronto. And if Toronto does it, it would be you just kind of question where you're putting your assets potentially.
So do you flip them at the deadline?
I don't like Dubas doesn't seem like a guy that wants to make those massive shakeups unless you're getting a significant improvement on the roster, right? Could Justin Hall be moved? Possible. I mean, we've been saying that for so long and it just never happened. So
No.
Just settle with the fact that he's sticking around. Just because that's how I kind of see it playing out.
Yeah. All right. What are you expecting out of tonight, buddy? First game back for the Leafs, a little sloppy.
Yeah, I'm expecting guys, just give us some patience in the first period. It's gonna be a little sloppy. I think Columbus is probably. I mean, they're at home. They're waiting for this game. I know the Leafs are waiting for this game too, but I think it's gonna be a bit of a sloppy game to start. So I think there's gonna be you're gonna be expecting I don't know what the over is in this game. You might want to consider betting that over. I don't know. I know hold on. I know Mike has that FanDuel Sportsbook app just queued up almost every 10-15 minutes of your day. How often are you checking that thing?
No, I mean, I can go at least 25 without going on it. Come on, man. Maybe 30. I can stretch it to 30. It's not that difficult. 6.5 is the over under on
Would you take the over at 6.5?
Well, 6.5 is even juiced to minus 120. Like this might end up getting to 7 if maybe not, but like at minus 120, it's sitting at 6.5. I mean, it's actually possible that this could get up to 7 goals at some point. And so yeah, I would take the over there.
Especially and it's gonna change as soon as we know exactly who's starting in this game. Probably, potentially.
Does it?
Like, does it mean more if Joe Woll is in this game than Ilya Samsonov?
To me, I don't think so. Just because, well, have you seen Samsonov's numbers on the road?
This is true.
They also haven't been great. I also like Merzlikins has like a 4 goals against average and like an 870 save percentage. He's been brutal. He's like 5-14 on the year. He's been brutal. I mean, I don't know if it's going to be him or Korpisalo in game 1. Either way, you'll see both of them in this back to back. But
that's why I think it could go over, just because
dude, Toronto could score 7 goals themselves. This could be a 7-3 hockey game.
Exactly. Like, this should be the Leafs should be able to score at minimum. I don't know what their team total is in terms of
3.5. 3.5.
Like, I think 3.5 is. Like, that's a silly number. They should be able to get that.
I agree. So there's another little bet that you can make on FanDuel. 3.5. Take the away team total goals at 3.5. That's a fun little prop that you can keep track while watching tonight's game. All right, Dave. Actually, really quickly, they had a big trade actually go down today. I want give me 60 seconds. Your thoughts, Tarasenko, and Mikula traded to the New York Rangers for a first, a fourth, Sammy Blaze, and prospect Hunter Skinner. Tarasenko, I believe I saw 50% salary retention as well. My thoughts on it first, I suppose, is the New York Rangers got themselves a heck of a deal here, getting Tarasenko at 50% plus Mikula, who adds to that legitimate Andre the Giant's level of blue line that they got chilling out there on in New York. He kind of adds to it. It's a big body. He was one of those depth defensemen that I really pinpointed as a potential target for the Maple Leafs if they were looking to get something a little bit different as a left shot, big defensive guy. And then you get Tarasenko, who you reunite him with his fellow countryman and Artemi Panarin. I think there's a chance that could really reinvigorate this guy who's having a bit of a down year, just 10 goals, but at 37, I think he did a year ago, kind of bouncing back after a couple of down seasons with some injuries. So I think this is a pretty good pickup, and that's a scary Rangers squad after this trade.
Yeah. My immediate thoughts was, okay, so they clearly just didn't want to pony up whatever the cost was going to be for like a Timo Meier or Patrick. I mean, Patrick Kane's injury currently is something that I think a lot of teams are a little worried about.
Yeah.
And for good reason. So
I don't know if you heard Darren Dreger talking about it today on Insider Trading, a little bit on Overdrive too. Almost sounds as if like he possibly could get shut down for the rest of the year. Like, it's possible. It's not being reported or anything like that, but it's not out of the cards, it sounds like.
It's the best way for him to not have to make that decision about the no trade clause. So that was one thing I did think about. So I thought a great pickup for the Rangers because again, they did it 3 weeks early. They're not, I'm sure a lot of the trade deadline shows are cursing about that, but I think if the fit makes sense, I think they could use some goal scoring help. They get that depth on the blue. And really, what did they give up? Because that first round pick they got from Dallas, because it could be the Dallas pick that goes to them, was from Sundqvist deal. The other picks, they're like, the Rangers have so many prospects and stuff. Yeah. They don't need the picks. So it was a deal that made sense for the Rangers. They need, and look, that Metro division, it's a tight race. So they need to make sure that they're putting themselves in the best position to ensure that they're staying within the division. It doesn't have to go into the wild card and potentially drop to the second wild card, have to face Boston in the first round.
Ooh, and that will not be fun for whoever has to do that. Really quickly, I just want to tell you a fun little statistic about our good friend Sammy Blais. If you guys forget, he was traded along with a second round pick to the New York Rangers in exchange for Pavel Buchnevich 2 years ago. Since then, Buchnevich has gone on to be a point per game player and has scored a whole bunch of goals. He was like 38 goals or something like that last year. Like legitimate, has been a stud top line player for the St. Louis Blues. Would you like to know how many goals that Sammy Blais has scored since that trade?
Well, I'm well aware, but I think the good friends here should hear about it.
Okay, tell me how many goals he scored.
You're putting me on the spot now to remember.
You said you know.
I know. He has no goals.
Yes.
Because I did write about the trade today, so I know he had 0 goals and 5 assists.
0 goals through 40 games this year. 0 goals through 14 games last year. So remember, he had a season-ending injury last year, and obviously hasn't been able to pick it up this season.
He has ever played more than 40 games in a season.
Yeah.
I just pulled up the stats right now. He's never played more than 40 games.
Did score 4 goals in the American League, though. He had a 5-game stint in the American League. Did score 4 goals down there. So
we shouldn't shortchange him. But I think the Rangers I think Buchnevich was in a contract dispute at the time, I think.
Yeah.
And that's why they made the deal. But sure, that's one they would like to have back.
Oh, my God. I wish the Maple Leafs made a smart deal like that at the time. Could you imagine if they would have been able to pick up a Pavel Buchnevich at that price? Oh,
they really need to up front find that like buy low guy that's just gonna haunt the other team. Like they haven't really done that,
But done that in free agency. Like I think Michael Bunting is a really good example of a guy who they've gotten a lot of value out of.
True.
And they kind of fleeced out of every. Like I'm pretty sure there was a couple teams out there that offered Bunting more money this summer or last summer, but he wanted to come play for Toronto, and he signed a 2-year deal to stay in Toronto too at $975 or $950,000 or something like that. So that's one guy who you could say maybe Connor Timmins turns into that, right? Potentially Connor Timmins. It looks early on that is a fleecing. Whether he can be to the extent of a Pavel Buchnevich for Sammy Blais, I don't know. But so far, I mean, Connor Timmins in exchange for, what was his name again? Curtis Douglas, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I was thinking Sanford. I'm like, no, it's the goalie coach.
Yeah.
For Curtis Douglas. So far, so good. And now they've got him extended for 2 more years at a pretty reasonable cap hit. Probably going to become a regular over the next couple of seasons. If he could stay healthy, maybe he could be that steal. Because at one point, people looked at him and said, that's a top 4 defenseman right there. That is a top 4 guy. Maybe he can turn into that at some point. Samsonov? Is Samsonov turning into that?
Yeah, well, in a way, yes, but he wasn't a trade.
He's an RFA. He was a free agent, I suppose. So he's similar to Bunting, not a trade fleecing.
Yeah. I'm thinking of Eric Holla for Pavel Zacha. Like one is clearly doing better than the other, and has fit a little bit better than the other.
Oh, you mean like Nazem Kadri for Tyson Barrie? Am I catching on? Am I catching on, Dave?
Yeah, Mike, you're doing a solid job right there.
Yeah. And with that, let's put an end to the show, buddy. That'll do it for us here today on the podcast. I'd like to thank you all so much for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all podcasting platforms, including on YouTube, where you can subscribe to us as well and receive daily Leafs content Monday through Friday. You can follow myself on Twitter at Mickey_Canuck. Follow Dave at D_Morassutti. The show as well at Locked On Leafs. We'll be back with another episode for you guys on Monday. Enjoy your weekends. Finally, games are back. We got a nice back-to-back against Columbus. We will break down those games for y'all on Monday. Until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.